All right. Today we're going to be talking about our background. Ashley, you want to move us forward a little bit? All right. Our background. Ashley's going to cover some program updates about the seal types. We'll move into regulatory updates and then responsibilities for the retailers, and then of course those burning questions that you all have. All right. One more slide. So who are we? If you're not familiar with ACMI, we're a nonprofit. We're a trade association, and we are here to assist. As David gave us a really complimentary intro, I just want to say that we have about 200 members that are active subscribers, meaning they're manufacturing members. And if you add in licensees and retailers, we have well over 300. Our mission is the same as it was when we were first getting started, and that is to bring safe art materials to the artist, to the children, and into the world so that we can keep everyone safe and keep everyone well informed also about regulations coming up. Um, so I want to take just a moment to pause here and let you guys know that next year is our 90th anniversary. So kind of why I want to put a pause here is just to tell you a little bit about where we came from. It kind of helps us understand where we're going. Originally, we were formed in 1936 as the Crayon Watercolor and Craft Institute. FHSA was enacted in the 60s under public law, and the primary concern in the 1960s was with acute hazards. Those kinds of hazards are immediate threats, like allergic reactions, things like that. They are measured by metrics like LD50, if you guys have ever heard that. As we moved into the late 60s and 70s, there was this growing concern about chronic hazards. And these are the long-term health impacts caused by the environment or products that we use on a daily basis. And that chronic exposure was not just limited, again, to the environment, but they really put a lot of focus on materials that were in people's hands, consumer products, and especially a lot on our most vulnerable population, which is the children. Between 1980 and 1986, there were 7 states that took a really proactive approach here by passing school purchasing laws. These laws mandated art materials be reviewed by a toxicologist and that all chronic hazards be clearly labeled for on the products. So in response to those mandates, ASTM D4236, as you guys are all very familiar with, was adopted in 1988. The momentum from the 7 state laws and that ASTM standard led to the art materials industries kind of pushing for a federal standard. And that was in hopes of preemptively mandating a chronic hazard review for all art materials. It kind of aligns everybody across the board. And thus, LAMA was enacted in 1988 and went into effect in 1990. LAMA explicitly incorporated D4236 by reference, and I just like to tell you guys, if you are on the ASTM committee, that standard is up for review this year, so watch out for when it comes time to vote. And this kind of brings us sort of full circle to ACMI. Again, trade association dating back to 1936. We've evolved to ensure that compliance with the FHSA and LAMA, as well as CPSIA from 2008, and particularly regarding the lead requirements, are met for all manufacturers and for the retailers in the program. All right. Thank you, Ashley. I think I'm handing it over to you now.
Yep, thank you, Barb.
Yep.
So through ACMI, we have a
Looks like we've
the
lost
certification
Ashley.
from.
Oh, there we go. Hey,
Oh,
Ashley, we lost you for a
yeah.
little bit. Do you mind starting over again?
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Yeah, so just going over AP and CL seal, ACMI authorizes the use of those two to be used on products. The AP is an approved product, and CL means cautionary labeling. So we'll deep dive into each of them a little bit and see what the differences are between them. AP specifically means non-toxic when used as intended by humans. So through ACMI, we authorize and do the evaluation based on humans, but not necessarily for the environment or animals unless the member asks for that outside of the ACMI program. The AP seal means that the product contains no harmful materials in quantities that could be toxic or harmful to humans, especially children, according to federal limits. And they do not cause acute or chronic health issues. They meet, as Barb was saying, ASTM D4236, FHSA, and LAMA labeling standards. Then the CL seal, as I mentioned before, is cautionary labeling. It still meets ASTM D4236, FHSA, and LAMA labeling standards. But the product will have some special instructions on it, and I'll be showing a few examples in the upcoming slides of visuals, so you can really see the seal on the package and what those other labelings would be. So for example, could be warning, use this product in a well-ventilated room. All right. So you may have noticed the AP seal definition has been updated a little bit. We wanted to update the seal so that it would include, can you guys see the next slide? I think my internet's going in and out. Sorry, I just want to make sure you all can see it. It says AP and
Yeah.
why the updates.
Yeah, I think we've gone backwards one,
Okay,
Ashley.
how about now?
There we go.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, there must be a delay. Sorry about that. All right, so here you can see I highlighted a few things. The non-toxic verbiage has been updated when used as intended by humans. And then now AP Seal can also include Prop 65 next to it or European biocide warnings. Manufacturers are wanting to have one SKU. Right now, they would have to, or previously, they'd have to have a SKU for a product having a different type of labeling requirement. So you couldn't have an AP with a Prop 65 next to it. So we are allowing that now to be done because AP is done evaluated at a federal level, and you have other like European warnings or state ones that are being evaluated a little bit differently in those areas. So you can now label according to both of those. So this helps our members by cutting down inventory. You can have one label. The change also is a reduction in cost because you're producing not so many different varieties of that same product. And also helps increase the international presence. So here is an example of what a product could look like. So this would be an oil color and just like a mock product. And this product would be evaluated, as I mentioned, by a board certified toxicologist. The AP seal on the product shows that it's an approved product according to the federal limits, and that you can now see Prop 65 is next to it on the label. There's no extra labeling used in a well-ventilated room or anything, so it doesn't have to be a CL product. But this change does allow one SKU, like I mentioned, and it can be sold anywhere in the US. The next is an example of an AP product being used with the European biocide labeling warning or supplemental warning. So you can see that this one's a little different because it has for USA only underneath of the AP seal. So that's just wording that you could see on a product as the AP seal is known here in the US. An example of CL products. So I know it may be hard to read it. So the one on the left-hand side is an example of a CL product without any other warnings besides the warning for what is in it, which is copper. So the warning says may be harmful if swallowed. So any item that has additional labeling requirements, they will also need to have a phone number on those products. So specifically in retail stores, this is really important to make sure that the product has the right label and the right requirements being met for what is in that product. The other one is an example of the CL with a Prop 65 and that supplemental language right on the package. All right. And then this one is an example of you have AP and CL both in a product. So this could be in a kit or just in what we would consider mixed labeling. You have a bunch of different items or colors in one product. They need to be labeled so that the end consumer knows which product is AP, CL, or if just conforms to ASTM D4236, which one has the supplemental label warning to it. So they just have to be labeled correctly and so that consumers could understand the package or the product when they're using them. So this is a little update on the ACMI side, like the seals update definition and how you could see the products being labeled moving forward. Barb's actually going to go into specific regulatory updates that are going on in the market currently.
Okay, thanks. I even remembered to take myself off of mute. All right, let's jump in. Pigment Violet 29, one of my favorite colors. So the EPA has proposed this new rule, and really this rule is protecting workers that are using dry pigment of pigments and working with PB29 in the manufacturing environment. So you won't really see a change to the final products. You're not going to see additional labeling on paints containing PB29. But what you will see is this ruling coming out to say how to handle PB29 when you're in the workforce, which may make some manufacturers rethink even dealing with it. So if this is an especially important color to your line, just make sure, your artist palette, make sure that you have some in stock just in case a particular manufacturer decides it's not really worth the handling risk for their workers. Basically, the risk can be mitigated by really exceptional cleanup processes and using a respirator. But I want you guys to be just aware that these are the kinds of things the EPA is looking at, which always kinds of just makes us, aware of what pigments go through and how they're reviewed, what could be here tomorrow, what may not be here tomorrow. All right, next slide,
Hey,
unless there's questions.
Barb,
Yeah.
Barb,
Yeah.
this is David. I'm sorry. It's probably worth calling out that PV29 is going to be more commonly known when it shows up within a formulation. It's a parylene, if I'm remembering
Sure.
that correctly.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
if I'm not correct, somebody please stop me. Please correct me, because we want to make certain that people are aware of how that's showing up on the shelf and can address it in a way that's going to be relevant for consumers.
Fair. Thank you, David, for bringing that up. There is a really great resource on the internet talking, giving all the pigment codes and what their associated names could be. There's many variations of them. I'm happy to share that at the end if anybody wants that resource. All right, we can move forward to Minnesota. Great. So we have been we've been working on the Minnesota lead and cadmium issue now for about 6 months or so. This was passed in 2023, and it was a very broad sweeping measure. Originally, it was aimed at children, specifically children's health. It then kind of morphed into PFAS and key fobs, which sound the same but are not. And it just got to be this really wild, unwieldy law that got passed sort of silently in the night. Um, right now, we are working with um, a lawyer and a lobbying firm, and with support from many of you that are on the line today, and with the support of NAMTA, we are attempting to get this language that you see on the bottom here um, included as an updated definition. And what we're going about is trying to get an exemption for art materials. And you'll see, I'll just read it out loud. Chalk, crayons, children's paints, other art materials, I'm sorry, except professional artist materials, which include but are not limited to oil-based paints, water-based paints, acrylic paints, pastels, pigments, ceramic glazes, markers, and encaustics. And I need to thank some of you that are on the line today for helping us get all these product categories in. We had, when we originally started, we had a much smaller product category definition. And so with your help, we've been able to expand it. What we're looking at is a couple of different efforts going on. You may see from Leah, who I think is on the line, you may see a sort of grassroots effort a little bit closer to the May timeline, asking you to fill out a one pager, basically who you are, why this law is impacting you, and kind of giving your background. And we'll give you an indication of timeline of when to send it and some email addresses to send these to when the time is ready. Why is this important to us? Why don't we believe that this law should be including artist materials? Couple things. So lead, there's already a federal limit for lead, and thank you, Leah. There's already a federal limit for lead written into the statute's definitions. We want to have the ability to have intentionally added lead for things like flake white and Kremitz white, which are, I think, brand specific names, but basically it's a leaded white pigment. It's a leaded white formulation within this intentionally added white. We don't want this taken away from our artists. And on the cadmium side of it, it's really important to know that back in the 1920s, cadmium pigment, could contain something like 150,000 to 200,000 parts per million of bioavailable cadmium. But today, with our modern science, we're really lucky to see something like 5 parts per million. I mean, that would be pretty high of a bioavailable cadmium. So what Minnesota's looking at here is total cadmium. They don't really care if it's available to be uptake or not into the body. They just want to do this sort of total. It's really just kind of a ban on cadmium at that point when you get down to a 75 parts per million. And again, we're here to get this exemption so that these materials are not taken away from artists. Let me just take a peek at my notes to make sure I'm not off topic too much. All right, so for the most up-to-date information that I have for you is that there's going to be a Senate hearing this Thursday where they will hear live testimony on what they've quoted as artist paint containing prohibition elimination, which is way too much for me to remember off the top of my head, which is why I wrote it down. So certainly this is a work in progress. We are very optimistic. We are very eager to see what all the exemptions are, what the definitions are, how they're accepted. We're just kind of uh, staying the course and working very diligently, and we're hoping that May is going to bring us some really good news. We know that the sweeping intention of this bill is broad. We know that it's an uphill battle, but we think between the misunderstanding of the bioavailability clause and an already existing lead threshold that um, we have some optimistic viewpoints that this will pass. Sarah Campbell, no, they're not voting this week. They're just having the Senate hearing to hear testimony. So we are looking, again, some people may be on the line. I can't see all of you, but there will be some people that are based in Minnesota that will be showing up. Our lawyers and lobbyists will be there, and we may be sending our board certified toxicologist to testify. This has all been sort of happening in my email while we've been preparing for this meeting today. So it's what I have. I know it's not comprehensive information. And if I need to back up anywhere and start over from the beginning, please say the word on chat and we can have a more in-depth conversation. But this unfolds quickly. And again, we're feeling quite optimistic about it. Yes. Yes. So there's a bill in the Senate and the bill in the House. And both will have to have very similar wording and similar strategy.
Hey, Barb, do you know, are you getting any indications as to whether or not there seems to be any sympathy for the distinction between a bioavailable cadmium
Oh,
and non?
yeah, there doesn't seem to be quite sympathy for that, but I think this testimony may be helpful in that matter. Like we saw in New Jersey, they had a lead ban last year that we were kind of uh, helping to educate. I think that maybe this testimony may develop some sympathy for this, and it may bring in some fairness. I think just people see cadmium and lead and just think, yeah, we should get that out without really thinking, oh, is it bioavailable? Does it scientifically make sense? Does it hurt our artist community? Okay, feel free to throw questions at the end. We'll move on to water beads, I think, are next. Great. So water beads, they're fun, they're squishy, they're colorful, they look like candy. Um, they the CPSC is considering new performance and labeling requirements because of these ingestion risks. What happens is children especially like to eat these. They are very tactile, they're fun, they're colorful, again, look like candy. They expand when they're exposed to any kind of moisture. And of course, that causes major issues. Right now, the CPSC is reviewing public comment, and the typical rulemaking process on this is about 3 years to complete. We've had the opportunity, Ashley and I have had the opportunity to meet with the the water bead lady is what she calls herself at ICFSO. And so, I have to say, very proud of her for taking, having this tragedy and turning it into a great awareness. We'll kind of follow this as it's really auto reads are not in our program, but they're often um, kind of a sidelier for a lot of our manufacturers. Alrighty, next one. What are we on to? Ooh, short form warnings. Ooh. So Ohia, they have come out with a short form warning. What you guys really need to know about this is that there's a 3-year transition period. Anything manufactured before that 3 years is up, which is 2028, January 1, it it has an indefinite sell-through period. Okay, so anything that's made and packaged before then doesn't have to have this updated short form warning. So know that going into it when you're manufacturing, when you're selling these products. Um, the retailers, we can read through all of the clauses here, but retailers, I want to specifically call out for you guys that that last clause, there's a grace period for you. You have 60 days. And what does that mean? You have 60 days from whence a manufacturer tells you that they've made the change to make that change on your internet listings, online catalog presence. Okay, so just know they weren't really clear about what 60-day grace period was. That's what it means. You should also know if you are a manufacturer or someone that has an in-court language agreement, an in-court settlement, that this does not undo it. You are still bound by the in-court settlements. So do not jump and cross over to OHIA short form, which is now long form, anyways, and just go with the idea that you don't need to use that court-ordered language. Um, we can we can come back to this if we have time and read through all of the changes if you guys want to, but I'm gonna leave it there for now and move forward to the small updates that we have on formaldehyde, um, EPR, and e-filing. So for formaldehyde, the EPA released its final risk evaluation under TSCA. They did this in December of 2024, and they determined that formaldehyde was it presents an unreasonable health risk. The health risks for formaldehyde include acute, chronic, and dermal. So in the acute field, you're looking at things like allergic reactions, sensitizers, irritations. In the chronic realm, we're looking at a decrease of lung function and a potential for cancer. And back to dermal, it is an irritation. Not quite sure why they call dermal out specifically, not under acute, but that's just something nuanced that I kind of noticed they separated those two things. Frequently, we see formaldehyde in wood composite type products. You guys probably remember maybe 10 or 12 years ago, there was this whole pallet craze where we had to look at the pallets in our warehouses and see what they were made of. If they were composite wood, like get rid of them like they were the plague. So this kind of finds its way into the nuanced world of consumer products, and here's what we're seeing. All right, so what are we doing right now with this formaldehyde? We're on a wait and see. The EPA will look at its findings, and they will use those findings to guide our future regulations. But we will likely see some stricter safety standards for formaldehyde, as well as labeling requirements for any products that do contain formaldehyde. And again, this is kind of like along the lines of pigment violet 29. You may just see people that are saying, "Hey, hang on, we need a moment to, fix our formulations and whatever, get formaldehyde donors," because mostly people are not putting formaldehyde in products, but you have formaldehyde donors, and they're going to need a moment to reformulate and get those out. Okay, ERP, so extended producer responsibilities. I'm just going to go ahead and read these next two to you to comply with the couple of states you see here, California, Colorado, and Oregon. The ERP laws for paper and packaging covered producers should have registered with CAA unless you're qualified for an exemption. I'm just going to say, if you haven't registered with CAA yet and this affects you, there's no penalty to do it. Just go in and register. Some of these states do include writing papers like coloring books, coloring pages, in their products, and some do not. But again, you're just going to have to go in, register, and follow this one up to make sure that you're compliant. E-filing. E-filing is moving forward at a not quick and not slow pace. It's just moving forward. We were at the ICFSO conference last week, and I mean, they kind of have the same sort of general thought process. It's coming to fruition. We're trying it out. Beta testing is going well. There are two deadlines. For general import entries, that is July 8th, 2026. And for the foreign trade zones, you're looking at January 8th, 2027. If you're not part of beta testing, you don't know what this is, please go on CPSC's website, look up e-filing. I'm going to say that the most important part about e-filing is to figure out if your product ever needed a GCC or a children's product certificate in the first place. If it didn't need one of those, you don't need to e-file. And that's a really big distinction. We don't want just people e-filing for no reason. Okay. What's next?
I think I'm up next with retailer responsibilities.
I'll be on mute. Go for it.
All right, so we're going to dive a little bit, and we made an example here of responsibilities of retailers and distributors. So they must sell only art materials that are labeled in conformance with ASTM D4236, LAMA, and FHSA. So with the example we have here, if you have a store and you're a buyer, you're in charge of bringing in new products, maybe, or having to find a product for private labeling. And you want to put the store's name on it, or you'll keep the brand name of someone else and bring it in. Any of those products that are being found or brought in need to have on the package a conformance statement. So that is conforms to ASTM D4236. The AP and CL seal do conform to ASTM D4236 and actually have that wording at the bottom of it. So that's a huge part of it. So the next thing, once the product is found, and if it does say that, if it doesn't say that, either way, you're asking for paperwork. It either needs to be evaluated, or if it has been evaluated already, you want to ask for the paperwork to see what was done on that evaluation. If it's through the ACMI program, we do have a certified product database on our website, and the retail store, a buyer, whoever can go on there and look and see if the product has been evaluated in our program, it will be listed there with an AP or a CL seal. So it's a quick double check system. But if it's not through the ACMI program, the paperwork that is provided will have labs and other items on there where you can call and double check to make sure that that paperwork is accurate and up to date for that product that is being brought in. So with that being said, FHSA does require the manufacturer to have cautionary labeling if needed. The products need to be labeled correctly for acute and chronic hazards. So that means even if there's the conformance statement on there, like I mentioned earlier with our CL product, there are other warning labels that say, well-ventilated room, wear protective equipment. There's a variety of different warning depending on what chemical is in that product. So it does need to be marked either by a CL seal with that language or by saying conformance statement and have that language on there, as in addition to a 24-hour cost-free USA telephone number that can be called. So the second part of that is that paperwork also needs to be evaluated for whatever state you're selling it in if there's additional requirements. So specifically, we all know about California. That product also needs to go through a Prop 65 review. So the store, if it's selling it either online or in a store physically in the state of California, wants to make sure that that regulation is on that product labeling. If this isn't followed, it does say that if a product is brought into a store and is not properly labeled, the store could experience seizure of that product, which leads to a loss in money. You're not going to be able to sell it. In addition, there could be a charge with a criminal violation or a fine. So it is pretty serious about making sure that the labels are on there, everything's labeled correctly, and that the paperwork behind is accurate. So just to bring it back full circle, rather the products at the beginning of this life cycle or at the end of it, we do have that resource on our website that offers some reassurance. But it's also designed to help make your product come to market faster. We know that for many manufacturers, we have heard that products in the beginning, when you're creating them, it's easier and less cost to make a change and do the testing of everything up front than waiting to the end when the product's almost already finished, and then you're spending a lot more to try to fix something or change something on that product. So really just kind of full circle. I know there's a lot of regulations out there right now, but this wanted to do an example of what it comes down to at a retailer responsibility level and how you can use the resources that are out there to just double check that what is coming into the store is labeled correctly. So there's no seizure of products or anything like that going on. With that being said, it is almost time to answer any questions that you have. We all just wanted to thank you for your time today. It looks like we have a lot of people on the line, and so hopefully we're able to answer any questions you do have. We will also be at Creativation, booth 623. Please stop by. We're happy to discuss the regulations we went through today or any questions that you may have. But we are also doing a session like this with different information and more in-depth topics at Creativation, and that'll be on Saturday, April 5th. With that, David, do you want to say anything else, or should we open it up for questions?
Well, let's go ahead and open it up for questions. I've got a couple of questions as well, but I want to make certain the people who are here on the line have a chance to jump in. Make certain we address everything that's relevant and burning for anybody who's with us. Anybody have anything cooking that you want to raise? And if you'd rather just post it in chat, we're keeping an eye on that. Jordan is tracking anything that lands in chat so we can raise that. Well, while we see if anybody else is going to jump in with anything, I've got a couple of things I want to raise. I'd like to go back to the short form thing from OEHA. And I never know how to pronounce that. But I think a couple of things for clarification. OEHA that's California only, right? That's not a federal
That's correct.
organization. That's California. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So so does that ruling apply only within California? Well, no, that's a dumb question. Of course, if it's going to apply to California, it's going to end up on everybody's label.
Yeah, so there was a time, and I'm sure many people remember this, when OEHA first came about. It was a Safe Drinking Water Act, and a lot of people said, "Well, that's fine. I'm just going to put not for sale in California on my products and leave it at that." Then not only are they like the largest economy state in in uh in the US, but it was also ruled many years later that if your product was sold kind of e-commerce and it could make it into California, they didn't really care if you did or didn't sell directly and you were still on the hook. So it is really California specific, but because there's such a large economy and because of the way things move throughout distribution, it really becomes everybody's problem, and you have to deal with it kind of at the onset of your labeling.
And then so a couple of other things in relation to that. So even though they're calling it a short form change, it's not really a short form in regards to the label. It's a short form in regards to MSDSs or other kinds of notices. And really, ultimately, what it means is potentially you're going to have to add more things onto the label. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, sort of. So short form was indeed a short form warning. It came about because people said, "Listen, I don't have enough space on my product. I need something shorter. So I need something that says Prop 65 causes cancer, end of day, something very short and to the point that raised awareness, but it didn't take up a huge amount of real estate on the label." And it wasn't that long ago that OHIA adopted short form warnings. But problematically, everybody kind of picked, well, I'm not going to say everybody, but lots of people just picked the short form warning and and warned for both endpoints, and that's cancer and reproductive harm. And they just basically picked a chemical, to say, well, we'll just label for this and we'll protect ourselves for both endpoints. We can't get sued for anything if we do this. And then OHIA said, well, that's not real specific enough. Short form is great, but we want more information. So
Okay.
what they did is say you can use sort of the short form idea and then add all the chemicals in and then call out all the repro and cancer harm. So they've really turned short form into a long form warning, and everybody's going to be crying about not having space again. Seth
Yeah.
Martin
Yeah.
has a hand up.
Yeah. I had a question about the Minnesota law. What does the enforcement mechanism currently look like for that? Is it similar to how California is, where there's basically a bounty on it?
So yeah, nothing operates like California. California, yeah, I don't mean that to be snarky either. It's sort of the public that enforces California, and they have a very unique situation.
Right, right.
Um, and this is not Minnesota. So right now, I haven't seen a ton of pushback, but what I have, we can't counsel anybody on what they should do with their products or what they should do with their stores. Perhaps there's someone in here that has a product and could offer that. I couldn't offer what exactly to do with it, but from what I understand, a lot of the retailers have taken the products off the shelf, and a lot of the manufacturers have stopped selling into Minnesota and or put a label that says not for sale in Minnesota. Um, Again, not legal advice, but that's just anecdotally what I've been hearing has been happening. The enforcement mechanism, I'm not sure. I don't know that anybody knows that yet. They've enacted this law and people have just kind of scampered to try and comply with it and or get it exempted.
Hey, Barb, we've got a question in the
Oh,
chat. Kathy Denny is asking if you could talk a little bit more about EPR. Just a basic explanation because, it's confusing.
because it's confusing. Let's see. Sure. So anything there was actually just something I kind of wanted to pull it up before we came on the line. There was something in Europe about packaging and paper products. Um, so there's a requirement to register with these states if you have paper or packaging going into these states. It's not super confusing once you go to the CAA, and start registering the process, and I think that maybe the best place to go is to register, and then you can decide if you're in the covered products area or not. Again, it's very limited to paper products and packaging. If you're dealing with, I think you said Kathy, if you're dealing with kind of paints and things like that, um, on a shelf. Thank you, Jenny. Um, we can maybe even click over there if we have some time, um, to just look at that, and they sort of walk you through the process about registering.
I'll work on pulling that up. All right, let
Hey,
me.
Barb, while Ashley is getting that, I want to ask one other thing, or just call
Sure.
out one other thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. Going back to, I'm sorry to keep coming back to this. I realize I'm a bit of a broken record about the short form thing, but you mentioned that the retailers have a 60-day grace period. That's a 60-day grace period if you have information online to update that information online. That's not a 60-day grace period for on the shelf. So it's not 60 days applying to whether or not. So the old product can stay on the shelf indefinitely, but you have to, within 60 days of being notified by the manufacturer, you have to update that information online. And I know we've got a number of retailers who do a lot of online business here.
Yeah, I feel like that's especially, I actually thought there was gonna be more questions on this today. That's especially important to call out that transition period for manufacturers is 3 years, but indefinitely if you've made the product within that 3-year transition period. But for the retailers, once the manufacturer has made the switch, even if they're just making it on one product, but maybe their whole company isn't up to date. Once they've notified you, you then have 60 days from that date to change your online um, references to their product. And to Seth Martin, again, I'm not sure how the enforcement is going to go on that either. Who knows when the 60 days, starts and ends, but that's the requirement to the short form update.
Barb, can you see the CAA website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I pulled up the California one, but there's a page similar to this exact one for Colorado, Maine, Maryland, and Oregon.
Why don't you just go ahead and click, oh, I was gonna say either click on register now or, but I guess we can just get rid of it. So this, Kathy, kind of walks you through the compliance guidance and then how to register if you need to register. Thanks for pulling that up. Jenny, thanks for sending the link out so quickly.
Okay, any other questions from anybody in the audience, in the group? We've got 10 minutes left. All righty. How about, is there a good way that both retailers and manufacturers can really stay up to date on all of this? There's so much in motion. Is there any kind of resource that you guys have in place to make certain that people can get up to the minute on everything?
Yeah, so I mean, on the ACMI front, we have a member resources area, and we also send out newsletters um, to the members that are for the members. Other than that, and you can go onto things individually as a company, something like product safety letter or Legicrawler, and watch these bills. There's several sites on the internet like saferstates.org, which is one of my favorites. They will kind of tell you what's going on in the different states, and they are a good overall resource if you know what you're looking for. It's exactly why trade associations. Oh, thank you. This is exactly why trade associations exist, because nobody wants to go through 38 different resources like I get to every Tuesday to find these things. But definitely, if you're part of the ACMI membership, there's member resources, the member meetings, and the newsletters that have this kind of information always going. We're constantly working with our toxicologists um, to kind of work with them. What we see a lot of times is we'll get an OHIA update or a different state update saying this chemical's under review or this chemical's under review. And it's really nice because we have a repository of all we don't, but the toxicologists do, of all the chemicals that are used. So they can just basically do a query and say, is this in any of our art products? And then tell us if we need to be paying attention to this or alert members. So that's kind of the benefit of being in a trade association. We can get to the information really quickly and decide if disseminating it out is important or not.
And Barb,
Yeah.
Barb, we've just had Sarah ask, how do you become a member?
Thank you, Sarah. So Ashley, if you are able to pull up our join page. Sarah, you're so sweet. and walk us through. Right now we have a couple of different membership types available. It would be nice if we had an associate member like we used to. That would be just kind of joining for information. But right now, what we have is an active subscriber, and that means that you're making at least one product, um, and you can join. This is our page for joining. If you want to use the seals, but you're not an active member, you can join as a licensee. And I think because there are so many, I don't want to, I can't speak before, we talk to the board, but I think there's going to be a future of ACMI having different market segments, probably an art educator association membership and some kind of an associate membership where maybe you don't make the products, maybe you just need to know about all the regulations going on. I can see this being kind of necessary. Um, future goals. But right now, this is how you get involved.
Well, could I just say, I think it would be great to have an associate membership, particularly for retailers who are needing
Yeah.
to answer these questions with the end user on a regular basis. And to be able to provide not just a voice for retailers, but also an easy access portal where you can stay up to date on this. And particularly because here, I'm gonna beat my drum. Retailers are for so many creative users and so many art makers and crafters. Retailers are the face of everything we do, and I think we need to make certain that we give everything we can to retailers to ensure that they put not just the best face forward, but also really can help tell a great story about these products and what we do to support and cultivate the creative process. So, okay, I'm done. I'm done preaching. But
Very, no,
okay.
very much agree. They're often the first face that anybody sees, for any of their art materials. So really the more involved and the more knowledgeable they are, they just help the whole universe kind of get through
Yeah,
these regulations together.
yeah. So,
Barb, and since
well,
you're right here, I was just going to show the search products as this
Oh,
mentioned this in the
oh,
PowerPoint.
fabulous.
There was
Yep.
like a little image of it, but this is where anyone could actually go and look up by material, company, seal type, and a list will populate based on that result, and you can see it. So this is the resource we were referencing earlier.
Yep. So again, just to kind of close out, um, we're not the only way to get to the llama compliance and FHSA compliance. So if you find as a retailer, you need to get this documentation and they're not an ACMI member, that does happen. I know it's mind blowing. Um, but if you need to get this documentation, get your test reports, call the labs, and ensure that those test reports have not been photoshopped. I cannot tell you how often that actually happens. Call the lab, give them the test report numbers, validate your test before you really put your neck on the line with those products. It happens more than you can imagine. And if it's a product that is through ACMI, check it on our website. Make sure that it's actively approved for whatever seal it has. That's just a good protection for you guys. A double check to ensure that what you've got on your shelves is really what you're selling.
Barb, thank you. Ashley, thank you. If nothing else, you guys have certainly very clearly illustrated the importance of being tuned in with an association or an organization that can help you, at the very least, be aware of how all of these things are taking shape. And even better, an association that helps you with learning how to communicate it with our end users. So thank you so very much.